Hey y'all, welcome back to All About April. Today's episode is going to be very special because I am going to be combining classroom influence and content with books. So what am I talking about? So I am moving into the sectionalism time period. Sectionalism is when you are loyal to a particular region of your country. So we are in the antebellum time period, ante, meaning before the Civil War. That cultural period is so significant. It's the period that actually a lot of people tend to like more than the actual war, but it's also the time period that people refer to as causes of the Civil War. One of the important pieces or causes of the Civil War is going to be the Compromise of 1850. There were multiple parts of it, one of them being the strengthening of the Fugitive Slave Act. As you know, a fugitive is a person who runs away. But in this particular instance, the Fugitive Slave Act was strengthened. So it was already a crime for you to run away, but now the onus was also put on Northerners to return runaway slaves to their owners. This is why it was extremely unsafe for Blacks to live within the United States or to run away and remain just in the North. The punishment was to be imprisoned for at least 6 months and or to face a fine of $1,000. Now we're talking about in 1850, okay? Now many Northerners are like, your slaves run away, what that got to do with me? I'm not trying to catch your runaway slaves. We don't even want them living here. Yes, that was a very common sentiment for Northerners, despite what you may have learned. But for many Blacks, whether you were free or a runaway, the possibility of you actually being captured and sent to the South, say for instance like Solomon Northup in 12 Years a Slave, that was absolutely a possibility. They steal your free papers, they send you down south, and you are a slave. What you gonna do about it? It's not like you can fight the system because, you know, with slave codes that existed, it wasn't like you were going to be believed anyway. But there's a book besides 12 Years a Slave that actually touched on this particular instance, and I find it to be so powerful. I have read snippets of it to my students. I also have left them on cliffhangers and they've been upset with me about it. I was actually prepping them before we left for spring break on what was possibly to come, and they're like, so you're just not gonna tell us? And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna tell you. I'll tell you after we come back. So I am talking about Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This is one of the most amazing modern day books ever written. I'm talking about it is a classic. There are very few people who have read this book and can say that everyone I know who has read it has been extremely moved by it. But referencing the Fugitive Slave Act and relating it to this story, I'm talking about Kojo's story. So if you've read this book, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, go ahead and log out and then come back after you read it. But if you don't mind a cliffhanger, I'm definitely gonna give it to you. In the story, earlier, Kojo's parents actually were running away with him and Ma'aku. Unfortunately, the mother and father were captured, and so Kojo and Ma'aku, they end up making it to the north. However, the story picks up a little bit later and they have free papers or manumission papers, but they are definitely fraudulent. But because of the strengthening of the Fugitive Slave Act, now Kojo and all Blacks really are required to carry these papers at all times, because the possibility of you being captured and going to or forced to live as a slave in the South, it just was a large possibility. However, at this time, Kojo has a wife and kids. Not just a wife, a pregnant wife and other kids. But one day, his wife goes missing. Now, prior to this, he's literally practicing with his kids what you gonna do whenever they come up to you and ask you for your papers. And the kids are like, they think it's a game. He is so afraid of what could possibly happen to his family because, remember, the trauma still lives with him. He does not have his parents living, even though Ma'aku has taken him in and has raised him. And his wife has been a free woman her whole life. So with that being said, when she goes missing, he's panicking. But he also understands the strengthening of the Fugitive Slave Act and what that means for him and his family. Ultimately, the story comes out that the wife was, someone asked them like, hey, it looks like you're tired. Why don't you ride with us? And she was like, yes, I am. She's, very far along in her pregnancy. And she was never seen or heard from again. And remember, she was the free person. She was not Kojo. So when we talk about the seriousness of the Fugitive Slave Act, what that looks like and what that means, a woman who was born free was not safe at that particular time in the country. Even though she had lived freely amongst, everyone, and probably had not as much of a concern as what Kojo did, especially walking around with fraudulent papers. So bringing this book in is very, very significant. I can understand why some states, Florida, would want to ban it, because why do you want people to know the truth? Actually, I don't understand, because the truth is the truth. We're not even gonna go there. But this story is so, so important. There are other pieces to this story too, in regards to colorism, passing, people actually coming to America. But as I mentioned, I'm moving into that particular part in what I'm teaching into my classroom. And I just find Kojo's story to be so, so important. And it is also a reminder of what Blacks had to do in order to remain safe at that particular point in time. But were you ever really safe anyway? Walking around with papers to prove that you are free is not a way for anyone to live. Your status and humanity always being on the chopping block is not a way to be able to live. The fact that people can just kidnap you, steal your free papers, and force you to live as slaves, are people seeing an opportunity to kidnap you and sell you into slavery so that they can make money, as they did with Solomon Northup. The sectionalism / antebellum time period is so significant to a lot of things that we still see and incur presently. If you know me, I talk a lot about Reconstruction as well. All of that is intertwined historically. But this book, definitely the feels and the writing of what Yaa Gyasi does, is just so amazing, especially for people who have not paid a lot of attention to history or were uninformed about that particular time in history. I will say this: I challenge you to pick this book up and to really, really embrace everything, all of the themes that she gives to us through this book. To start off the beginning of slavery and to go through, the 1900s, it's just so powerful. For her to write this kind of novel in the present day, it's just something that you never ever forget. And I've read this book, a few years ago, but it's never left me. So yes, I wanted to share that with you because, again, I'm rolling into that as soon as spring break ends. But the Fugitive Slave Act, the Compromise of 1850, leading into the Civil War that occurs from 1861 to 1865, it's just so impactful. So let me know if you have read Homegoing, what you think about it, what you have thought about it. If you haven't, this is not a book that you will just read on your Kindle and put away. This is one of those that you want on your coffee table or on your bookshelf, so that you are constantly reminded of the greatness of Black writing. So thank y'all so much for tuning in with me today, and I will see y'all next time. Bye y'all.